The XY Advisor podcast is intended for professional financial advisors. All discussion is limited to publicly available information and should not be interpreted as legal, professional, or financial advice. XY Advisor does not hold an AFS license nor provide any financial services. Before making investment decisions, you should obtain financial advice from a qualified financial advisor.
Hey team, Ben Nash here. I'm one of the co-founders at XY Advisor and founder of the rapidly growing Pivot Wealth, which is my business baby I started from scratch about 8 years ago, and I've since scaled up to become one of Australia's better known financial advice companies for high income accumulators. You can join me every Tuesday as I have the pleasure of furthering my own knowledge by interviewing some of the best people in our industry and beyond to improve every part of what we do with our advice process. We're currently hiring financial advisors and associates, so if our approach resonates, you can learn more at pivotwealth.com.au/careers.
Perpetual is a dynamic, active manager offering an extensive range of specialist investment capabilities, including Australian and global equities, credit, fixed income, multi-asset, as well as environmental, social and governance, designed to help meet the needs of clients across Australia and New Zealand. Underpinned by our long-standing and market-leading Australian equities capability, Perpetual also offers an extensive contemporary range of funds. As one of Australia's longest-serving and most trusted investment managers, our long-standing commitment is to deliver superior outcomes over the long term to clients.
Hey guys, Ben Nash from the XY Advisor team, and today I'm pumped to be here with Scott Dawkins. Scott is the founder, director, principal advisor at Griffin Financial Services. He was a planner over in the UK for a bunch of years before coming back to Oz to start his business. Keen to pick Scott's brain and see what's changed over the 10 years that he's been in business, how he's tackled his team and business growth over the last little bit. Scott, thanks for joining us, mate.
Great to be here.
Mate, I thought a good place to start was just around like the evolution of your business, how it's came about, and how you ended up where you are today.
Sure. Yeah, well, I guess my journey in financial planning actually started over in the UK. From Adelaide originally, sort of finished my degrees, had sort of spent some time overseas and then backpacking for a little bit, and wasn't as much as I love Adelaide, was sort of looking to get onto somewhere else. And so went over to the UK and got picked up by a wealth management firm over there. Sort of a bit of a sink and swim kind of environment. So it was very much like a baptism by fire, sort of thrown into the deep end. But that worked out fairly well for us. Within a couple of years, was actually fast-tracked to sort of be a partner in that business. And then by my 2-year time in the UK ended up being sort of 7.5 years, which was really only brought to an end because I had some young kids and wanted them to grow up in Australia. But yeah, so I think that journey over in the UK was really good, but I think was fortunate enough to sort of win an Advisor of the Year award, twice in a row, just as I was sort of wrapping up my time in the UK, and then sort of got a good exit out of that business and used it as a chance to sort of take some downtime. So when I moved back to Australia, I took a year off. One, to make sure, what direction I wanted to take in the industry, whether I wanted to sort of stay in financial planning. And then, when I made that decision pretty quickly, it was sort of looking, okay, well, what do I want the business to look like? And I think it's one of those things where sometimes, if I was in that business and I stayed in it, and because it was going so well over in the UK, you really don't change things once you've got momentum. And I think the opportunity to sort of start with a blank sheet of paper and to look at, okay, well, what did I like about what we were doing? What didn't I like? What could I do better? What could I do differently? What do I want the business to look like? Who do I want to be dealing with? Probably one of the big things I noticed was that actually, a lot of my clients in the UK were sort of investment bankers and corporate lawyers. And whilst, some of them are really nice people, a lot of them were just very money driven and probably didn't align with my values. And it wasn't particularly rewarding working with them. And so one of the big things I wanted to do differently here was just make sure that I was, only working with people that, you enjoyed their time and that you wanted to be spending, time with and that you genuinely wanted to improve their lives. So started, from scratch. So I didn't want to buy a book. I looked at sort of joining another financial planning firm, but it's kind of hard to start something when you've already made the decision to leave. And I always knew I wanted to run always knew I wanted to run my own show. So started and took on sort of 67 clients in sort of the first year.
67. That's a big effort from a standing start.
That's why I know the number, actually. I think someone else sort of pointed it out to me at the time. But I guess I came from sort of an environment where you're used to sort of taking on lots of new clients. And when you don't have any, you've got time to sort of find new people. And, it's only really, a couple of people a week, right? Like, 1 to 1.5, a week. And you sort of needed that, right? Like if you don't have any revenue to start, like you need to get busy. And I had, I did have a bit of a rolling start because I took the time off, and so I'd sort of spent some energy, massaging the network and reconnecting. And I did like a big launch event where I basically just put on drinks for kind of everyone I knew. I'd sort of been living overseas for a number of years, and so it was like hey, I'm back. I've started this business. Do you want to hear what I'm doing? And then from that, people were like, hey, I know someone, or blah blah blah, and it all spread. But I think a lot of it probably helped also because. I focus, being a planner in the UK, that was sort of my strength and my experience. And so, pretty much everyone that I met, particularly early doors, was a UK expat or had moved back from the UK. And so there was a natural flow on from that. And I think in kind of trying to generate new people, like, someone trying to get referrals on the basis of general financial planning can be quite tricky, but, getting a referral for someone who used to live in the UK is very specific and easy for someone to sort of bring up in conversation. And I think also, like, sometimes clients want to refer you, but they don't know that you're looking for business. And I think as long as if they know that you're growing, that you're doing the right thing, you're looking out for them, you're showing them that you care, you're proving that you're knowledgeable and capable and interested, and they know that you're looking for work, like, then it's amazing how many people are willing to refer you and to willing to refer you sort of straight away, like very early in the process. Like I would say more than half of the times you receive a referral, it's before you've finished doing the initial work for someone.
Yeah, totally. I've noticed that in my business, and it's sort of like you obviously very much appreciated, and that you are doing the right thing by the referrer, but you sort of think like, well, they haven't even seen sort of the end product, but you've got people going, oh yeah, this is great, you need to talk to those guys. It's like, okay, great. Appreciate the vote of confidence. And
yeah, it's cool. And I think, I guess a lot of the initial value is, like, sometimes people come into it and whilst they're interested in getting advice, they are probably a little bit cynical, and they've got that kind of voice in the back of their head sort of thinking like, what's this going to be like? And, and then I think when that experience is more positive than they expected, they're very willing to do that. And I think if you can kind of take that momentum and then run with it, it seems easy to grow. But so yes, I guess over 10 years, I think a part of the challenge that I've sort of always had is, we've always looked to sort of take on kind of 40 to 50 clients, a year, and have very quickly sort of tried to build a support team, around us, around me to sort of to do that. But I think probably the biggest challenge I've always had, and I think it's a common thing that I think people get in planning, is the dependence on yourself. And so moving from a sole planner, all the referrals going to sort of Scott Dawkins, to a multiple planner, the referrals going to Griffin, as the business. And that's probably been a challenge that's taken a couple of goes to get right. And I'm sure you can relate, in your business as well, Ben. But and I think, so we've looked to sort of to build, so like the structure at the moment, we've got there's another planner who we've sort of looked to transition a lot of the ongoing relationship work to, and that's been that's gone for the most part, I think, really well. Like he'd sort of been an associate in the business for a little while, and so he had a relationship with a lot of the clients already, and a lot of this was then just sort of transition, making sure that the client knows that he's now like the key point of contact, and that I've not sort of disappeared, but ultimately you can ask him anything that they need to, and how to do that. And then, to sort of help support that transition, I've got another associate to sort of support me more directly, so that I'm not sort of leaning on the other advisor to sort of help me. have an office manager, and then a couple of people in the Philippines that sort of help with sort of back office type stuff. And so, but yeah, it's been an interesting growth journey with like a few sort of waves and fits and starts, and generally always the easy bit I've probably found is actually finding the new work. It's more about how do you make sure that you're delivering on promises and meeting service standards and improving what's actually happening, and without me always being the roadblock.
Or without you having to be the one that's working 60, 70, 80 hours a week on top of that. So I'm keen to dive into that a little bit deeper, but you touched on niching at the start, and I think that's something that gets a lot of airplay in advice, and for good reason in my view. I'm keen to hear though, obviously you've carved out a bit of a specialty for yourself, being a planner in the UK, understanding the intricacies around there, and working with a lot of clients that have those needs. Was that a purposeful thing when you started? Did you position the business in that way, or is that just something that you've naturally gravitated to? And what have been the lessons around that for you?
Yeah, so it is something I did intentionally, mainly because it was like the main thing I had, right? So I started planning in Australia having never been a planner. And so I went straight from being an advisor in the UK in the time off that I took off between, I did sort of the relevant quals. Like I did a degree in finance and commerce, whereas you probably couldn't, you can't do that now, right? Like I sort of started, from day dot, set up a company, I had a license. I'd never been a planner in Australia before, and I started my own business. And so when you've got 0 clients and you're not looking to buy any, and you've never been a planner in the country before, like it's sort of having the niche that is something that I could be very good at that. And I was, I learnt really quickly how to do all the Australian aspects of that and spend a lot of energy in that while I was, transitioning. So, but I think, in hindsight, you look back at it and there's lots of other reasons why it sort of works really well, I think. So being a niche doesn't mean that you don't have to deal with people that fall outside of that, like I think, which is often the common misperception, but it means that you're positioning yourself as an expert in that area. And these are the types, and you can have more than one. Like we've probably got a few, like we deal with a lot of young professionals. So, like my clients would typically be 35 to 50. They'll often also be an expat. And then, we actually also do a lot of work with sort of same-sex couples as well. And so if you get they can kind of sometimes be sort of all three, or they might be 2 of the 3, or they might be, just one. But I think like having a niche makes it really easy for someone to understand where you fit and if you're appropriate and with you go to that. And then if you've got something that you're concerned about, you want someone who, generally speaking, that they'll be like, oh, well, do you know anyone that can do this? And, I get a lot of work from other advisors as well in the space, because they'll be like, well, I've got this, I don't really understand it. And, sometimes you can kind of do a one-off piece of advice for the client on that specific issue. But, again, I think the more that someone knows you as something rather than, like a GP type character, I think the more likely you are to get, referrals. And even for, new centers of influence, like if you're trying to work with an accountant or you're a mortgage broker or another professional, like if they know specifics rather than like, I'll deal with any of your clients. It's more of a, if you've got someone who's got this and this and this, that's where I'm really good. And then you'll get all of those and then you'll probably still get people that are just looking for advice, but you'll get all of the people that they've got that kind of fit, that character. And then if you do that well for them, they'll be like, start to think about it more. Whereas, and again, I think it's also easy to be good at it if you're doing a narrower type of advice, right? Like it's sort of
totally. I think it allows you to become an expert in their problems. I think that's why people engage advisors, is to solve problems. It could be the investment's not growing or got a tax issue or whatever. And if you're dealing with the same problems day in and day out, you quickly become an expert in those problems. Whereas if you're solving different problems for different people all of the time, and people can do that, but you're just seeing less of that stuff. Whereas you would know, you get a expat that walks through your door, it's like, bang, here's the 7 things that you need to have you focus on, and then you can help them with that. So I think it allows for higher volume in that problem solving, but with a smaller number of clients and trying to be all things to all people. And I love what you said there for your clients, that they can sort of hang their hat on that as well and say, well, yeah, these are the UK people, or the, they understand the issues of same-sex couples, or whatever it is, that instead of just saying, oh, this is a money person to go have a chat to.
Yeah.
So you mentioned at the start around starting with that blank piece of paper as well. And I love that, because I fully relate where you do get so caught up in your day-to-day that you're like, well, this is just the way that we've done it. And sometimes when you do take a step back and realize that there are gaps or opportunities, what are the biggest things that surprised you after going through that exercise for you?
How little I wanted to do it the way that I had done it in my previous sort of stage of the career. Like, it was one of those things where, we had a process, the process worked, you repeated it, you came in every day, and that was sort of what you did. And I think starting again without already being in flow with all of that from that, just allowed you to be like, oh, hang on, actually, this is the kind of people I want to be dealing with. This is the types of advice that I want to provide. And this is how I think we should be structuring things. And so a part of that was quite natural, because I left the country and I was moving into a different advice system. And the UK at the time was still very much, it wasn't really like ongoing service fees. There was a lot of sort of upfront type work. And unless someone was sort of investing more money, there wasn't really a lot of review. So it was, Australia was probably 5 years ahead of the UK in that part of that journey. But like it was surprising just how differently, I wanted to do things. Whereas, if I'd started my business in the UK, I would have probably just done it the same way, but just with a different name and different set of people and whatnot. And it was, I guess it's exciting as well, because you can kind of you can make it feel yours, and it makes it, and it really resonates with your own principles and values and goals and direction and stuff like that. So, whereas when you're working for someone else, it tends to be about money more, it's like you need to be profitable to them, within that business. Right. And so it was nice to sort of, recreate and choose the way that you wanted to do things.
And funnily enough, that when you make the decisions with that lens, that it tends to lead back to profitability. And I think you mentioned that you're onboarding 50, 60 clients a year, every year, but you're doing it when you're focused on the client experience, or not necessarily purely on the bottom line. Of course, you've got to focus on the bottom line, because that's what business needs to survive. But it obviously hasn't impeded your ability to, hit growth and grow your business, right?
Yeah. No, I think that's the thing. I think if your objective is money, you'll probably end up with less of it. I always found. Whereas if your goal is doing the right thing and you charge a fair and consistent fee for that, then you'll probably be more profitable than if you're, because I think the difference is like, I remember getting asked once earlier in the career, like, how do you get so many referrals and do that? And it's like, well, you have to care. And if you can't pretend that you care, because it's the genuine nature of your interaction with people that they resonate with, and that's what they enjoy. And if you can demonstrate that you actually do really want the best for them, and you're able to, you've got the capability and the experience to sort of to get the right questions coming out, so that you understand that person, and if you can then articulate their problem better than they could probably themselves, that's sort of what gets referrals. But you have to be authentic, I think, about that. Like, if people can think they can or not, like, they will in general and mass tell if you're just trying to do the best thing for you rather than for them. But then ultimately that will lead you to more money anyway, because people engage you and they refer you, and you don't have to waste time and energy in other areas.
And I think that's what people get behind as well. I don't know if it's a younger client thing. I think it's an all people thing, but I notice that we do a lot of work with younger people as well, and they seem to pick up on that. I don't know if it's more or more quickly or more accurately or something, but they can, I don't know, they tend to sense that. But yeah, I would agree with that sentiment. So you mentioned about like your business has sort of grown along for a while, but it sounds like, and we were just having a bit of a chat the other night at the XYPD Day after party event, and you were talking about the fact that it's been like off the back of COVID in the recent past that you've been more focused or more activity around your team growth, as you say, bring up your associate into an advisor role, bring another associate in, trying to ensure that you can continue growing your business, but without it being you, the one that's being the sole main driver of that work. What have been the lessons learned in that process for you?
Yeah, I guess there's probably a couple of parts to that. So I think often what happens, business growth, even if the client numbers are a straight line, like it's business growth is rarely a straight line. It's often you grow really, really quickly, and then you've got to put a lot of money in investing into the business, and then it'll flatline for a little bit, and then you'll grow really quickly again, and then it'll sort of flatline, and then you'll grow quickly again. And so you have, I guess, different waves of growth. And we'd probably got to a point where we'd sort of invested heavily into sort of systems and processes. And I think COVID probably sort of forced that upon us in a lot of ways where, because we went basically instantly working remote for all of 2020. And we had a well-established team. And so that worked really well. And we, we understood each other, we bonded well. But I think when you're not there face to face, like you realize your systems and processes need to be really slick. Solid. Otherwise, things are going to be exposed pretty quickly. And I think in doing that, it helps you sort of identify who's doing what and who should be doing what. And I've constantly had the mindset of like I only want to be doing the things, and for the team, like I only want them to be doing the things that they're good at and that they enjoy. Maybe spend a little bit of time on stuff that they're good at but don't enjoy. But like, I don't want them doing things that they aren't good at and don't like, or that they ideally just don't like. And that's when we sort of built in, some more, we took on an extra person in the back office in the Philippines to sort of pick up a lot of the things that the Australian-based team didn't want to do. And then I guess going through that process, it really firmed up our ability to take on new work. And then again, I was working too hard. And so I guess my lesson in that is just delegate more and earlier. I've always struggled by holding on to things. Like I do care and I do like my clients, like as people. And as the part of the challenge of that is I've sort of struggled initially to sort of let go. So we did our first wave of trying to transition clients across, and I didn't really let go. And as a result of that, it took a long time to get traction. And I think as soon as once I did actually get to the point where I let go and I let Josh run with it, he did phenomenally well. And it was one of those things where, actually they're probably almost better served by him because I've got a million other things that I'm doing, and he's got a smaller number of clients at this stage. And so he's going to be more responsive and get back to them faster and, ask the right questions. Whereas if I'm trying to juggle everything, then I can't do that well, even if I'm the person who had the relationship in the beginning. And so, I think if I was to do it again, I'd definitely look to delegate more earlier and, not be reckless with it, but I think to trust in the people, trust in the process, and then make sure that, you're communicating it appropriately to the client.
And then get out of the way, which is the hard part. I've certainly been in the same position. And I think especially when you're the founder and you sort of the driver of a lot of those things, that you have things that you would typically put into an email or a document or a conversation or whatever. And then everyone's different. So they would do things a little bit differently. And I know for me, that's like one of my big limiting beliefs, not just for my work, but across life. It's like, I feel like there's a particular way that things should be done. And if they're not done in that particular way, I'm like, shit, that's not getting done the right way. But everyone's got their own way. And, as long as they're getting to the same outcomes and the clients are getting the results that they come to us for, then how you get there that's okay. And like you say, that if your attention is on, you're watching the P&L, you're doing like marketing or marketing growth, team development, all of these things, that it means that you can, while you might, if being an advisor was your only job, that you're probably going to do it incredibly well and perhaps better than someone else in your team, but it's not. So it means that your clients are probably better served by having someone that where it is their only lane, they then know that they can draw on you for support when that is needed. Ultimately, clients looked after better, and that supports the business growth.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I guess the more time that you can free up, for you to be able to do other things, and again, I guess it depends on what role you want in the business. But again, I want to be able to help more people. And I think there's lots of people that need advice. And I feel like there's a lot of places where people were getting advice from before that are no longer options for them. And ultimately, there's only so many people that I can help. So we need to grow the team in order to be able to do that. And as long as you're giving them sufficient support. And so one of probably one of the other things that I sort of put in place that I think really helped is I sort of blocked out 2 mornings a week, like for 3 hours, just to sort of work on the business type stuff. So like no meeting time, just dedicated time that is supposed to be for things that is, I guess, improving the business as a whole, rather than sort of doing, fee earning work type stuff, like or like client meetings or all that type of stuff. And whilst I took a little while to honor it, and I don't always honor it, I think just having that as the constant reminder to sort of be giving yourself time for that. And I think that, and I feel like my value could probably be much greater in the business if I was maybe more true to that, and then allowed to, more to delegate.
Yeah, it is definitely hard to find that time. I know I try to do all Tuesdays, I block out for no meetings, and that's my on the business time, because I find that if I end up stacked with meetings on Monday and then Tuesday, I feel like the week is halfway gone and then I haven't got anything done and I get super frustrated. So blocking that bit of time at the front end of the week means that I can, have conversations with the team, or work on a marketing initiative or a partnership thing or a bit of content or whatever. You need to do that, because it's like we just tend to consume what we've got to work with. And if you don't have barriers around your time, then you just get stacked, and then you're so caught in the day-to-day that you never end up moving.
And, I have 4 kids and a dog, and I like to do other things like it. So it's, like you want to be able to have time, for yourself too, right? Like, and so you're not useful to anyone if you're sort of always doing sort of 60, 70 hours a week.
Absolutely. And so on the team stuff, if you were to go back to the start, is there anything other than the delegate faster? Is there anything else that you do differently?
I think that's probably the big thing. Like, I think I feel like I did that well early, and then I sort of stagnated with it. And I had sort of a false start with an advisor initially, and then I was probably a bit slow to pick that up again. But that's probably the big thing. Like, I've just struggled to let go of enough. Like, and I think the more that you can kind of delegate responsibly earlier, then I think that's the better. Whereas, because particularly with client work, like back office stuff, I think is really, really obvious and really easy to do. But the client contact, and so being comfortable with it not being you, or not being exactly the way that you do it, like what you were saying, but it being a way that is still a good way, and with the right mindset, and because it's, again, and putting the energy into training on that, rather than you can't sort of expect change without changing the inputs, or changing the energy, right? So if you're not providing kind of the right kind of feedback or development or support, then you can't expect a different result. And so probably more of that sooner. Like,
I love that. And one of the things that I've learned over the last little bit is just having that clear, like, yes, having the training support, but having a structured approach to doing that, to say, okay, every role in the business, what are the outcomes that we need from that role? Okay, it's these meetings or this retention or these SLAs around these particular tasks. And then from day one, you can just say, hey, okay, this is the outcomes that we need for you in your role. We're not expecting you to do it tomorrow, but we are expecting you to do it in 90 days or, whatever the time period is. Then you can build your training plan around that. It needs to be flexible, obviously, to shift things based on the individual, based on what's going on in the business. But at least then you've got the goalposts to work towards, sort of like what we do with our clients.
Yeah, and that's probably the other thing that you've sort of prompted with me there. I think, I've kind of always had a documented business plan, and we've sort of refreshed it a little bit, but I've only really just recently started sharing that more deeply with the team, and particularly around sort of like the quarterly goals and targets and projects that we're sort of working on. And I think that's been probably the last 18 months has been a real positive influence in sort of everyone feeling like they're on the same, journey and going to the same place, rather than it's sort of been like, there's a clear goal and there's a clear plan, but it's just in my head. It's more about making sure, okay, like, is everyone on the same boat, going to the same place? Like, and I think, sharing freely, like, numbers and targets and, ratios and, projects. The other thing that we probably started to do during COVID as well was like quarterly catch-ups where we sort of just work on a process in the business. And so we'd choose, it might be like the review process or the onboarding process. And we'll just sort of spend 3 or 4 hours, as a whole team, because we were working remotely. It was a really good chance to get everyone back together and to do that, and would just sort of break it apart and be like, okay, well, are we happy with this? And is there anything that needs to change, or whose responsibility is this? And should it still be theirs? Or, how can we enhance this experience? Or, that kind of stuff. And sort of once a quarter, and we still do that now. And I think it's been really good as a way to get together and a chance to sort of be like, okay, well, not trying to rebuild everything from scratch, but just look at forcing yourself to be thinking of a continuous improvement. Like how do we do things a little bit better? What is there, a part of the process that we change, or can we systemize it or streamline it, or are we getting the best use out of our technology or software or those types of things? And then planning it quite intentionally. So we have sort of a list of projects for the year that we're working through, and then we make sure that's then incorporated into that. And then we'll go out and do like a, nice long lunch or an activity or something as well at the end of it, and hope that someone's taking good notes so that they I feel like it's kind of, it's really bedded that sort of continuous improvements, pursuit of excellence type approach, across the board, rather than just my own expectations that are inside my head.
I love that. And what I've found, we do similar things from time to time at Pivot, and what it gives is the team ownership of the processes, because I'm a bit of a process nut and I build out all these processes, and then everyone else just has to follow them. But when you go, okay, well, here it is, what do we need to change? What's working? What's not working? What do we do differently? And then they go, okay, well, actually this and this. And then all of a sudden it's no longer my process, but it's their process and our process. And then they get behind it more and follow along more. It gets that collaborative, the continuous improvement, but it's them driving it, not thinking that it's, something that just comes down from up high and, they're just expected to follow without any input.
Absolutely. I think, delegated accountability. I think, because one of the first things that I always did wrong was, like, ultimately I was the person accountable for everything. So, like, there's other people that would be doing the parts of it, but ultimately if it didn't get done or did get done, like, it was sort of like it stopped with me. Whereas I think, and like what you're saying, you want to delegate the responsibility or the accountability for the different functions to people, in the team. So it's not something which, like, you obviously still have an input and you care about it and you're putting energy into it, but it's ultimately the, someone else in the team that has some accountability for it themselves, so that, again, that you're getting a stronger buy-in and also freeing up your own headspace.
Totally. You want it to be, our business coach talks about, like, you don't want to be the one waking up in the middle of the night thinking, is this thing done or is that outcome being delivered? You want someone else, not that you want your team waking up in the middle of the night, but it's, analogy for them, that you want it on them. You're there obviously to support, but they're the ones that are owning it. And then they feel that they've got that ownership as well, which I think is super helpful. Scott, my last question for you is, what's coming up for you? What are you sort of focused on over the next little while?
Yeah, good question. So I think I feel like I've got a couple of hires left, within the business. So we've had a really good year this year. Like, we've sort of grown close to 30% actually, and I think with that we'd sort of done a lot of the back work in sort of in building capacity. But I think I'm again looking for a couple of new people I think in the team. So probably like a CSO and then like a practice manager at that sort of more senior operational leadership kind of role, so that we can kind of continue growth. So I feel like I've got a fairly kind of ambitious sort of 5-year plan, for the business, and we're sort of 18 months into that part of that journey, and hit target for the first financial year already. So that's been encouraging. But again, it's just about how do we make sure that again, I'd like to be sort of probably more 50% on the tools and 50% running the business by this time sort of next year, and so needing some greater support within the business to do that. But it feels like a really exciting time. Like I know I was chatting to you about it at the drinks, but I think given the amount of change that the industry's gone through and everything that's happening, like I feel like it's probably the best time there's almost ever been to be an advisor right now. Like it's like advisor numbers are down. There's lots happening in the world, and people generally seek advice. And if you've got a business that you've got strong processes in place and you can kind of deal with the mountains of changing requirements that we've had to cope with over the last sort of 5 years, probably in particular, like if you've survived that, like now it's the time to thrive, I think. And so I don't know, I feel really enthusiastic and excited about the kind of the opportunity that's in front of us from where we are. So it's just I guess taking advantage of it.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that there is that groundswell for consumers, and more people are getting great advice, and then they're sort of spreading the word about that. And I've been saying for a long time, I'd love to get to a point where, if people are out of shape with their physical health, then, their sort of society knows, and then they're saying, why don't you, get a PT or, do that thing that you need to do to get there. I think money is something that we don't talk about so much, but it's also just not saying like, if everyone's got a mate that's the finances are probably way out of whack, but we don't say, oh, you have to go get a financial planner. I think if that changed, and it is changing, but it's great for everyone. So it is certainly exciting times ahead.
But I feel like we're on the right side of that transition. Whereas I think the industry has changed and is changing quite dramatically. I feel like that's starting to be meaningfully felt, at least from my perception. So it's
absolutely. Yeah. For anyone that's interested to learn more about some of the opportunities that you might have coming up, what's the best way for them to get in touch?
So probably just through the website. So griffinfinancialservices.com.au is the website. So reach out there.
Awesome, mate. Well, thank you for sharing your story. Look forward to continuing to see you kick goals into the future, mate. And we'll catch you on the next one.
Sounds good.